we are going to move fast because today is a tough one because it's a repetition of everything we read like 3 weeks ago. We didn't have class last week because we were at the Lemley, but with Greg Lemley. But what did people think of that movie, by the way? The Lemley, you didn't? Great movie. Stop it. It was really good movie. It was only in theaters with Greg Lemley, and he was there and talked about his movie and his life, and it's a good movie. I mean, it's definitely worth seeing, and it is going to be streaming soon, so you don't have to only see it in theaters. That was one of the questions I asked him, is when is it going to start streaming? Because it's called only in theaters. It was kind of an ironic question, but it is going to be streaming, and it's definitely a good movie that kind of there's a lot in there, a lot of stuff about family, a lot of stuff about business. Kenny is going to sing. Oh yeah. Fiddler on the Roof is our Christmas Eve special offering. There's about 15 seats or 20 seats that have already been booked. Book it. I mean, there's 100 seats in that theater. It's the largest theater, but I think that's going to sell out. Anyways, we're hoping that you will join us. Folks, everything that we're going to read today, virtually we read before. So don't think that you're having a flashback or a deja vu moment, or that you did hear this before. So this is all from the portions that are before Ki Tisa, before the golden calf and Moses getting the 10 commandments on Mount Sinai. We read this as part of Truma Tetzaveh. So like chapters 25 through 30 are now repeated here in chapter 35, which is where we're starting with Vayakel and Pekudei. These portions are usually read as a double portion. So these portions are usually read together on a Shabbat or throughout that week. They're read together because they're fairly short. They're the same theme. And as I said, they are repetitious of the previous two portions, Truma and Tetzaveh, which are oftentimes also read as a double portion. Not as frequently as Vayakel and Pekudei, but oftentimes Truma and Tetzaveh are also doubled up. And again, the reason why we double up portions, some years we have an extra month on the Jewish calendar, and so we have to add those days as those weeks as possibilities to have for years where we have those extra weeks. And then some years we do not have them. And so we double them up. We match them up. So let's jump in. But of course, the question is, why is it repeated? Why is this here twice? Look, it's tough because to some extent, the whole portion, the first time, was about stuff we don't have anymore, that we haven't had for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. But even if you want to say from a historical point of view, we want to know what our ancestors wore and how they sacrificed and what the tabernacle looked like and everything else, then the question still is, why is it repeated? The Torah definitely repeated it, and there was no question that it was intentional. It was no question that the editors, the writers, whoever you want to say, however it was done, this was done intentionally. But it was done with the intention of showing that everything that God commanded when it came to building the ark and the tabernacle was done by the people. That they literally did what they said. What do you mean it's duplicate? Yes, but not this. So Deuteronomy does not have this. I just want to tell you, you're right. So there is parts of Deuteronomy that are repetitive of Exodus, especially being at Mount Sinai and getting the 10 commandments are there twice. They're there in Exodus and then in Deuteronomy. We looked at that, but it is a different point of view. It's a different perspective, perhaps a different author, all of those things. This is the same author. This is the same penmanship. This is the same person did this. But whether the person wrote it twice or whether the editor decided to repeat it twice, that I can't say. We really can't say. But there's a reason for it. And it really is to stress that the people did exactly what God wanted them to do, that they followed the instructions, and that everything was accounted for. So when we get to the line, I'll point it out. But let's get moving into Vayakel, which the first word of the portion, Vayakel, means, and Moses convoked or assembled the whole Israelite community and said to them, and again, vayakel is the word kehilah, community. It's the word we use today. Glory, what is your translation for convoked? Probably not convoked, but yeah. Yeah, I like assembled better. What is King James probably has convoked though, right? Gathered. Oh, gathered. That's even better. So again, the understanding is that he brings everybody together. The word kahal is the word we use for a congregation today, for a community. It's not the building, but it's the group, right? Is the kehilah. So wherever we are, we're a kehilah, we're a community. The word kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, is the assembler, the person who brings people together. We don't think about that because we use the English, when we say Ecclesiastes, we're using, the English is actually the Greek word, which ecclesiastical, it means a church or a body, a group. So it does mean the same thing. But these are all fancy words for bringing people together. What?
It says Moses talks about the community. We know that there, from the next chapter of Numbers, we know there's whatever, a lot of people. There's no microphones at the time.
Yeah. So how do they spread this out to the people, right? So and it's very clear that it's the whole community. It says Kol Ha'idat B'nai Israel, the whole Israelite community. It doesn't just say the elders. It doesn't even just say the men. It says the whole community.
I mean, we can go on. It's not a big deal. It's just something that.
Look, the understanding is that in Judaism, traditionally, there's this understanding that when Moses spoke, no matter how loud he spoke, the people could hear him, no matter how far away they were. So there's like a mystical element to this, which is the fact that, like, God is amplifying his voice. Not that he's making it loud, but he amplifies it so that everybody hears it and everybody knows what he's saying. So there's a mystical understanding of it. There also was the fact that in the ancient world, people communicated over large groups by relaying the messages, right? So they would speak, they would relay it. Somebody would say something, and of course it's like telephone, does it really come out at the other end the same way that it started? So it's a very important job. And actually the people who did that job of relaying the messages, they were important and very trusted people. And so they had to be good at their job. So that was an important job. And there were people who did that. There were people whose job it was to relay the message to the back of the community when they assembled. There's another thing that they did in the ancient world, and we know about it because the Talmud actually talks about it. And that is that they used flags to communicate to people. Now, we don't know exactly how these flags worked. We don't know exactly whether they told people to stand up, to sit down, whether they're, being told, a message, that's positive, a message that's caution, whatever. We don't really know how they worked. But the Talmud tells us that the synagogue in Alexandria, Egypt, during the time of Jesus, during the time of the rabbinic period, was so large that they had these flags that they used to communicate across the congregation, the community. So the building itself, like you said, without modern electronic equipment, was so big that they needed to communicate with the flags to tell people what prayer they were on, or how they were, what they were praying, or what the prayer was, that they used flags to do that because they couldn't shout it during the middle of the service. So that's interesting because it tells us that they actually had a system, and that it did actually sometimes happen that they had so many people in a room, so many people gathered together that they needed to do that. But yeah, the idea that there's, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people hearing this message. Now, what's interesting about the message that we're about to read is it's reversed, because right what we get here is what we got at the end of the previous chapter, which was this part about Shabbat. So let's just look real quickly here. So right here, we looked at laws of Shabbat. And here it is in chapter 31. Right? We talked about Vishamru, V'nei Yisrael, et Shabbat. Right? Interestingly, that came at the end of all the laws of what they were supposed to build. Here, when we do the accounting, we actually have the reminder right at the beginning. So in chapter 35, it's actually almost kind of reversed it, which is this reminder that it says, on 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day you shall have a Shabbat of complete rest. Holy to Adonai, whoever does work on it shall be put to death. And again, we read that before. You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath day. And Moses said further to the whole community of Israelites, this is what Adonai has commanded. Take from among you the gifts to Adonai. Everyone whose heart is so moved shall bring the gifts to Adonai, gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen and goat's hair, tan ram skins, dolphin skins, acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for anointing oil, and the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli, and the other stones for setting, for the ephod and the breastpiece. This is what we read about at the very beginning of Truma, which is let people give based on whether their heart is so moved. And that is the exact word that's used there again, the Truma, the gifts for God. So, and there it says, and let all among you who are skilled come and make all that Adonai has commanded, the tabernacle, its tent, and its covering, its clasps, and its planks, its bars, its posts, and its sockets, the ark and its poles, the cover and the curtain for the screen, the table and its poles, and all the utensils and the bread of display, the lampstand for lighting, its furnishings and its lamps, and the oil for lighting, the altar of incense and its poles, the anointing oil and the aromatic incense, the entrance screen for the entrance of the tabernacle, the altar of the burnt offering, its copper grating, its poles, and all its furnishings, the laver and its stands, the hangings of the enclosure, its posts and its sockets, the screen for the gate of the court, the pegs for the tabernacle, the pegs for the enclosure and their cords, the service vestments for officiating, and the sanctuary for the sacral vestments of Aaron the priest, and the vestments of his son for priestly service. And that is a repeat of what we had read before, which is this is the way it's going to lay it out, which is starting with the ark, then moving to the tabernacle, then moving to the other parts of the tabernacle, and then, of course, finishing off with the priests and what they wore. And so that's the macro picture. That's a repeat of what we're going to have. And then we are going to now get them to go out and do it. So before they actually do it in this Torah portion, they're reminded that they're going to go do it. So there is a repetition, not only of what they're going to build, but actually this kind of overall commandment that go out and do these things. And so then they do it. So they hadn't done it yet after the golden calf incident. And many people say, and this is kind of what I shared before, just to remind you, that maybe the reason why they had to build all this stuff in the first place is that if they don't do that, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they're going to do the golden calf. That if they don't build the ark, the altar, and all these great things for the priests, they're just going to make a golden calf out of it. I believe that's why it's like this. And I believe that the structure is set up like this. And it's not my feeling. Other people have this feeling too. The reason why the laws were given, then there's a golden calf, and then there's them doing it, is exactly to set up this reason of why they did what they did. So lest anybody say, well, why did the Jews have to build this stuff? Like, why, like, does God really need this stuff? And the answer is, yeah, maybe, maybe not. But if we don't do it, we're going to do that. And they definitely didn't want people to make a golden calf. And what's interesting is, as we've seen on Tuesday, so it's kind of good that we're reading Tuesday the Tuesday class is reading about the golden calves that were in the north. You see that throughout the book of Kings, the writers, the editors, again, probably the priests who wrote this book of Kings, tell people over and over again, don't do what the Israelites are doing. Don't worship the golden calves. They're bad people Even when they're maybe not really bad, they're bad because they're worshiping the golden calves that Jeroboam built. So it's not a coincidence that the golden calves, are the ultimate bad thing. But is it really because they're golden calves, or is it because they're the alternate to the tabernacle and to the ark and to all the things that are in Jerusalem? Because if all of these things that are here, and they may not have all been there, but if they're like spiritually there, because we don't know that the Ark of the Covenant, and we don't know that the altar and all these other things were exactly the way they were in the desert. But if the people of Jerusalem believe they were, then this is actually the code to everything that's there, which is that, and this is what my professor Richard Friedman wrote in Who Wrote the Bible. The key to understanding who wrote the Bible is this discussion that we have right now, which is that the priests of Jerusalem who wrote the Bible, who edited the Bible, want you to know that if you don't worship with this stuff, you're going to worship with the other stuff, the golden calf, and that's a no-no. That's bad. And you don't want to be like the Israelites. You don't want to be like the northern Israelites. Now, we haven't gotten to it yet on Tuesday, so for those of you who are with us Tuesday, and for those of you who are not with us on Tuesday, I'm going to ruin the story for you. It's not really ruining the story because it's history and you should know it. In 722 BCE, the Assyrian army came through and destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. And they exiled the people. And they destroyed all the cities in the north, and they destroyed all the leadership of the north. And the Assyrians took away all the treasures, and they leveled it. And there was no authority there anymore in the north. There was no northern kingdom anymore. It was the end of the kingdom. So right now, on Tuesday mornings, we're about 75 years before that. We're about 800s BC. Remember, we're backwards going forward in time, getting to the 700s. That event, the Assyrians conquering the northern kingdom and taking away the golden calves and destroying that kingdom and the people that worship those, was validation that the people of Judah said, you see what happens if you worship golden calves? God's going to punish you. He's going to destroy you because it happened to them. Now, guess what? It happened to Judah about 150 years later. In 586, the Babylonians, the successors to the Assyrians, are going to come through and do the same thing the Assyrians did. But they didn't know that then. They're looking at it from their perspective around 600. They know the Babylonians are there, but they're hoping that they're going to get spared. They're not going to wind up like the northern kingdom did. And they're saying, look, if we get our act together and do the right thing and continue to pray to God at Jerusalem and offer sacrifices to God and do all the things that the Torah tells us to do, we're going to be okay. God will keep us in our land. So all of this comes down to this issue, which is, how are you worshiping? Are you worshiping calves? Or are you worshiping at the ark? Are you doing what God wants, or are you doing what God doesn't want? And so this is important because it actually gives the key to unlocking what our ancestors thought happened.
Also, isn't doing what God wants the glue that kept the people together?
Yes, but there's a problem, Joyce, which is that the people of the South who wrote the Bible, whose Bible we have, were telling us their side of the story.
Mhm.
And we see it on Tuesday over and over again. We're getting the South's perspective on this, which is that the North is messed up. But it doesn't seem like the North is really messed up. I mean, you can make the argument they were that much closer to the Assyrians, so the Assyrians were able to conquer them, and by the time they got to Judah, they ran out of steam. Guess what? We'll see exactly how they ran out of steam in the Bible. In the book of Kings, we're going to see that. In the coming weeks, we're going to see the Assyrian army get to Jerusalem and run out of steam. And again, the people of Judah said it's God, that God did it. Maybe it was a miracle, but that's not the point. The point is that looms in the background in their minds, which is, if we do the wrong thing, God's going to destroy us. And they were very afraid of it. I mean, naturally afraid of it because they saw what happened to their northern brothers, to their northern cousins, if you will, to the people who worship God. But they worship God the wrong way. They worship God with altars that look like golden calves. I will tell you that based on what we know, those people in the north, they were descendants of Moses and Joseph and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and they believed that this wasn't a big deal. They didn't believe that they were worshiping an idol any more than they thought in the south that the cherubim that they had on the top of the ark were idols. They didn't believe that their calves were idols. I know that seems weird from our standpoint because golden calf is a horrible thing in our Bible, but we don't know that they saw it like that at all. They just thought they had Levites. They had Kohanim. They had people walking around in their backyard offering sacrifices, except they weren't doing it in Jerusalem. The problem was our ancestors in Judah, the ancestors of the Jews said, no, if you don't offer them in Judah, if you don't offer them in Jerusalem, if you don't come to the temple, forget even coming into Jerusalem. If you don't come into our building and do it, it doesn't count. All I'm going to tell you is you got to keep that in mind. And when you see all these pages about what the priests wear and all these pages about what you're supposed to offer and all these pages about the ark, pretty important to them. So just keep that in mind while we're reading this. This is arguably the part of the Bible that proves everything to them. For us, it's an afterthought. For them, it was their whole lives. You're reading about the lives of the people who wrote this book. That's it. That's why there's 10 chapters about it in the Bible and one chapter about the creation of the world. There's one chapter about the creation of the world, but 10 chapters about the creation of the ark and the tabernacle. All right, so what happens? They go out, the whole community of the Israelites left Moses' presence, and everyone who excelled in the ability and everyone whose spirit was moved, bringing to Adonai an offering of the work of the tent of meeting and for all its service and for all the sacred vestments, men and women, all whose hearts moved them. It says men and women. All who would make an elevation offering of gold to Adonai came, bringing brooches and earrings and rings and pendants and gold objects of all kind. This is where the commandment, right, the law, turns into action. This is where the truma, the offering you're commanded to do or encouraged to do or told to do, if you want to, this is what happens. And it says that the people did it. And everyone who possessed blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, and dolphin skins brought them. Everyone who would make gifts of silver or copper brought them as gifts for Adonai. And everyone who possessed acacia wood for any work of the service brought that. And all the skilled women spun with their own hands and brought what they had spun in blue and purple and crimson yarns and fine linen. And all the women who excelled in the skill spun the goat's hair. So you can see the women did have a big role to play in the construction of the tabernacle. And the chieftains brought lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod and for the breastpiece, and spices and oil for lighting, for the anointing oil and for the aromatic incense. Thus the Israelites, all the women, men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything for that work that Adonai through Moses had commanded to be done, brought it as a free will offering to God. And that's exactly what it says. They brought a nedava, which is the free will offering. But we heard already, they're not the ones who are going to do the design and the hard work here of laying all this stuff out, because it says, Moses said to the Israelites, see, Adonai has singled out by name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, endowing him with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft. And those words are all given out. Chokhmah, Tavuna, and Da'at. These are all different kinds of, or different words for knowledge, wisdom, skill, which is why they translate it as different things like that. But it's a miracle. God gives them this knowledge. It's not like they just had it. God gave them this. It's a divine spirit, inspiring him to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting and to carve wood, to work in every kind of designer's crafts, and to give directions. He and Oholiav, son of Achisamach, of the tribe of Dan, have been endowed with the skill to do any work of the carver, the designer, the embroiderer in blue, purple, crimson yarns, and in fine linen, and of the weaver, as workers in all crafts and as makers of designs. Now, why is it so important that we have these guys named, Bezalel and Oholiav? Why is it so important to have these guys, right? Because, and not just to have them have ability, right? That God gave them ability, but that God told them what to do. And the reason why that's so important is lest anybody think that this was something that was in their minds, right? That this was just, oh, I think God would really like this. This is a nice pattern that God would like. There's no question that this comes right from God. This wasn't like his imagination. He was told by God, by giving the images. God put it in his mind of what to do. So he didn't just decide what he wanted. It wasn't an aesthetic choice. This was a commandment that God gave. It's literally the blueprints are coming directly from God. Lest anyone think that this was just like, oh, this is what he thinks God wants. This is what God, the patterns that God likes. Let then Bezalel and Oholiav and all the skilled persons whom Adonai has endowed with skill and ability to perform expertly all the tasks connected with the servants of the sanctuary, carry out all that Adonai has commanded. Moses then called Bezalel and Oholiav and every skilled person whom Adonai had endowed with skill. And so there's other people who get to help out too, right? Everyone who excelled in ability to undertake the task and carry it out. They took over from Moses all the gifts that the Israelites had brought to carry out the tasks and connected with the service of the sanctuary. But when these continued to bring free will offerings to him morning after morning, all the artisans who were engaged in the tasks of the sanctuary came from the task upon which one was engaged. And they said to Moses, the people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that Adonai has commanded to be done. And so this is something we have not read before because we didn't know what would happen. As it turns out, people brought more than they needed. The people didn't just bring what they were commanded to bring, or, they didn't just get the minimum, they got more than they needed. So they set a goal. They had that little goal, fundraising goal, and they blew it out. They exploded past it. But the problem is like they don't need it. It's too much. So Moses thereupon had this proclamation made throughout the camp. Let no man or woman make further effort towards gifts for the sanctuary. So the people stopped bringing. Their efforts had been more than enough for all the tasks to be done. So they bring the stuff, and they got more than they needed, which is wonderful. But you can understand why. This is the greatest project that people could ever do, right? This is making stuff for God. So the people do it. And it says, by the way, that, we haven't gotten to it yet. We'll see what happens. But they got more than they needed, and they had to say enough. As we say in Mandarin, genug, enough. Right? Enough, genug. And that's what they did. They stopped. They had to stop. All the skilled among those who engaged in the work made the tabernacle of 10 strips of cloth, which they made of fine twisted linen. And here we get into the repetition of the same directions that we had. Blue, purple, and crimson yarns. Into these they worked the design of keruvim. So again, the keruvim were not just on the ark, they were also in the design of the linen for the tabernacle. The length of each cloth was 28 cubits, and the width of each cloth was 4 cubits. All the cloths having the same measurements. They joined 5 of the cloths to one another, and they joined the other 5 cloths to one another. And they made loops of wool, blue wool, on the edge of the outermost cloth of one set, and the same on the edge of the outermost cloth of the other set. They made 50 loops on one cloth, and they made 50 loops on the edge of the other cloth of the other set, the loops being opposite one another. Now, I want to show you one thing real quick. before we get any further into this. Just want to do something real quick for you. Actually, I think I can show it to you. So let's take a real quick gander at this. I know we can find this. Okay. This is why Wikipedia is not such a bad source for things. I want to tell you that. Why is it not searching now? Hold it a second. It's not. Wait a second. Why is it not moving? Hold it a second. I think I have it open on two. I do. I have it open on 2 pages. Okay. I know I opened it. Here's a handy dandy chart, which shows us where it was in the first part of the Torah and where it is in the second part, the part we're reading right now. So what's interesting is we're reading about the contributions. We're reading about the craftspeople. This stuff is actually from the end, right? Oh, sorry. That's where we're reading right now. This stuff is from, so far we're right about here. Well, this stuff is where we kind of are right now. But when we get into the tabernacle, we're actually reading about the tabernacle, even though it comes after the ark, right? The ark we read about first, the table. So we're actually not reading about it in the way, the order that we had it originally, which is we started here. We started with the contributions, and then we went to the ark and the table, and we went outwards from the small area around the ark outwards to the rest of to the tabernacle. This is actually kind of in reverse, which is that the ark is going to be in the next chapter. It's going to be in chapter 37. So it's not in the same order that we build it.
Is that on the right? Is that what they built? Is that built for real, or is that drawing?
Yeah, so this is a drawing. This is like a time from the Middle Ages of one vision of what the tabernacle will look like. The problem with this drawing is that it is not colorful. It doesn't have the full colors of it. So if we look at
blue and red and purple,
correct,
we're not seeing it.
so that doesn't help. But let's see.
Drab.
Yeah. So let's see if there's a better. We showed pictures of it before,
Mhm.
but oh, by the way, here's a nice picture of an acacia tree. So we're talking about the shittim a lot, the wood. This is an acacia tree. So these are the trees that they're talking about. Acacia tree, yeah.
Beautiful tree.
Yeah. These are the kind of trees you see in Africa too, right, guys? Yeah, so these are trees that you find in areas where they do not have big oaks and big cedar trees and big fir and kind of evergreen trees. Let me just see if there's any good pictures of no. But this is again.
It's a very hard one, correct?
This is what Solomon's temple, yeah. But this is what Solomon's temple was like after, not with not the temporary tabernacle, but yes. This is where maybe the ark was within the temple, within the Holy of Holies. So when we had a permanent structure, it was similar dimensions, but not exactly the same size. So the question of whether this was a recreation of the tabernacle, we don't know for sure, but there definitely seems to be an emphasis on it. So the acacia wood was some heavy duty wood, but
well, my 1 cubit's bigger than your 1 cubit.
I'm not even going to answer that. So that is a boastful statement there, sir. I know. So yeah, anyway, but we're talking about relative cubits, which is a little bit, it's about 18, about 15 to 18 inches. So why are we saying 15 to 18 inches? Because they were really small back then.
Yeah.
You would have been a freakish giant back then. You were Goliath, Mike, you were Goliath back then.
Beth, there are midgets.
Little
Have you
people.
ever been up
I don't think,
there?
I think we use the word little people now.
I'm sorry.
Anyways,
When I was up there, there were.
yes,
called midgets.
okay. So they are, so we're reading this in a different order. So, and they made 50 gold clasps and they coupled the units to one another with the clasp so that the tabernacle became whole. So again, they connected they sewed the pieces together, part of them, but then the end pieces were locked together by clasps. And they made cloths of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle, which we saw, and they made cloths 11 in number. The length of each cloth was 30 cubits, so that's about 45 feet. And the width of each cloth was 4 cubits. The 11 cloths having the same measurement, and they joined 5 of the cloths by themselves and the other 6 cloths by themselves. And they made 50 loops on the edge of the outermost cloth of the one set, and they made 50 loops on the edge of the end cloth of the other set. They made 50 copper clasps to couple the tent together so that it might become one whole. And they made a covering of tan ram skins for the tent and a covering of dolphin skins above. So that is the outer covering. So there was a covering on top, and we'll show that to you one more time when we get to it. They made the planks of the tabernacle of acacia wood upright. The length of each plank was 10 cubits, and the width of each plank was 1.5 cubits. That is the dimensions that we heard of these before. They are not exactly 2x4s. They are 10 cubits, which is again about 12 to 15 feet, 15 to whatever feet tall, which is pretty long. And each was about 1.5 cubits, which again is about 2 feet wide. Each plank had 2 tenons parallel. We talked about that. Tenons are the wood that is carved out to make an insert so that the things can lock together, tenons. And they did the same with the planks on the tabernacle. Of the planks of the tabernacle, they made 20 planks for the south side, making 40 silver sockets on the 20 planks, 2 sockets under one plank for its 2 tenons, and 2 top sockets under each following plank for its 2 tenons. So again, the tenons would go into the sockets, and it would create that's how it would be locked together. And the other side of the wall of the tabernacle, the north side, 20 planks with their 40 silver sockets, 2 sockets under one plank and 2 sockets under each following plank. And for the rear of the tabernacle to the west, they made 6 planks, and they made 2 planks for the corners of the tabernacle at the rear. They matched at the bottom, but terminated as one at the top into one ring. They did so with both of them at the 2 corners. There were 8 planks with their sockets of silver, 16 sockets, 2 under each plank. They made bars of acacia wood, 5 for the planks on the one side of the wall of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the planks on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the planks of the wall of the tabernacle to the rear to the west. And they made the center bar to run halfway up the planks from end to end. They overlaid the planks with gold and made their rings of gold. As the holders for the bars, they overlaid the bars with gold. They made the curtain of blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen into a design of the cruvim. And they made for it 4 posts of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold, and their hooks of gold, and cast for them 4 silver sockets. And by the way, if you notice that the sockets seem to be made of silver, probably held up better for the tenons in that it was silver rather than gold. The gold obviously looked prettier and was more expensive, but probably not as functional as the silver that was used for for how they were locked together. They made this. Yeah. So let me just show it one more time, because I showed up how it locked together. So this is This is what it looked like.
Sure. Right there.
He knows.
We're gonna go off the main computer in here is frozen. So we're restarting it. We froze, but you didn't freeze. So we're restarting. Don't worry, folks, we're here. Our computer in here, our computer froze. So,
It looks like it.
all right, we're still here, everybody, if you can hear us. Oh, wait, you can hear us. I had you muted. Yeah, so we lost the computer in the temple, but we can hear you on my computer. Okay, so don't go anywhere, anybody. We are restarting the main computer in here that allows us to share with you. So hopefully this is working.
But he did at the time, right? He had to.
They had the technology of what they had. They had the highest technology that they had.
He had to speak to all the Israelites. They had to figure that out.
Yep. Well, that might have been divine technology. He might have had God helping him on that
Well, that's
one.
what this book says, right? This book says there's just some things are unexplainable. And it's assumed that that God was making these things happen.
The hand of God.
whatever it might have been. I don't remember what it was.
Okay, folks.
And of course, with all the things that people were bringing, you say that come and go.
Don't go anywhere. We're still getting you on. It's on the bottom, Mike. Yeah, there you go. Here we go. All right.
There you are.
So it's working again, I hope. Okay.
Let you enter, you have to let everybody in.
No, I have to let everybody in.
Recording in progress.
Yeah. Can everybody hear us again? Can you hear us? Ooh. So you have us now, right? We got everybody.
Oh, their heart is moving.
Yeah. So we have you. We got everybody back. But wait, you can hear, right? Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
All right. We can hear you. So, and now we're back on the screen. So thank you to Mike for getting us back restarted. So we were talking about the poles that went in, the planks that went in, and hopefully everybody can see this again. Yeah, because it says you can. So it says they made the screen for the entrance of the tent of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen done in embroidery, and 5 posts with their hooks. They overlaid their tops and their bands with gold, but the 5 sockets were of copper. No, we didn't, because we didn't get to the very end, which is the copper sockets. Let me just show you. Let me just show you one thing, folks, because it is important to. We did show people this picture, which is the. No, stop that! I'm not going to do it again. We're gonna show them the. We're going to show them the tabernacle one more time. This is a computerized reconstruction of what it looked like with the proper colors, right? Right, and this is the colors. What I don't like about this is it doesn't give you there's something missing here, which is the what it really looked like, which is something more like this.
Oh,
Because this is the one in Timnah. This is the reconstruction of it. So you can see the
Where the bird open inside?
no. So this is the main altar right here. Now there was an incense altar in there, so there was offerings, but the actual animals would have been sacrificed on this outside altar. So this gives you a little idea of what it looks like. And again, we saw another further out picture. This is, you can see in Timnah. This is the life-size replica of it. You can see it here. This is the altar. This is the washstand. This is what the dimensions of it would look like. This is the covering. This is the outer covering, the kind of the rain covering to it. And then, of course, you can't really see the other coverings over the tabernacle itself, but that's it. And then, of course, then we talked about, we haven't gotten to it again, but this is the outer wall cloth covering too, with the entrance.
and then way in the back is the Holy of Holies.
Yeah, and the Holy of Holies is in the back of this, is in the back of that building, right? So that's the this is the, if you look at the this from up above, you can see this gives you an idea of what it looks like in Timnah. And when you see this, So this gives you, the idea, like you said, Joyce, that
Mhm.
Holy Folies is
Way
in the
back
back.
there.
After 40 years, you really must be.
After 40 years of you taking it through the desert, yeah, it would have been worn down because it went through a whole generation of use.
Right.
Did they keep it? We don't know. That's the question. Whether they kept it in the temple, we don't know. Was that part of what was in the temple of Solomon? It's very possible. All right. So let's keep going. But Solomon made the ark of acacia wood. Now we're getting back to the ark. So we started in the outside and then we move into the inside stuff, which is the opposite of the way that it's presented originally. And this is again, as they build it. So you can make the argument that they build it in the reverse of the way it was commanded to be built. But Solomon made the ark of acacia wood, or at least it was reported in reverse. I don't know that it was built in reverse, but it's reported that way. But Solomon made the ark of acacia wood 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. And again, this is the ark, not the tabernacle, the ark that's inside it. He overlaid it with pure gold inside and out, and he made a gold molding for it round about. And he cast 4 gold rings for it. For its 4 feet, 2 rings on one side of its side walls and 2 rings on the other. He made poles of acacia wood, overlaid them with gold, and inserted the poles into the rings on the side walls of the ark for carrying the ark. He made the cover of pure gold 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide. He made the cruvim, the 2 cruvim of gold. He made them of hammered work at the ends of the two ends of the cover. 1 cruv at the one end and 1 cruv at the other. He made the cruvim of one piece with the cover at its 2 ends. The cruvim had their wings spread out above, shielding the cover with their wings. They faced each other. The faces of the cruvim were turned toward the cover. As we showed in the pictures before, the 2 angels with wings looking at each other. He made the table of acacia wood 2 cubits long, 1 cubit. And again, this is the table that was in by the Holy of Holies.
Mhm.
1 cubit wide and 1 cubit wide and 1.5 cubits high. He overlaid it with pure gold and made a gold molding around it. So again, the dimensions normally are 1 to 1.5, almost always 1 to 1.5. He made a rim of hand's breadth around it and made a gold molding for its rim about. He cast 4 gold rings for it and attached the rings to the 4 corners at its 4 legs. The rings were next to the rim as holders for the pole to carry the table. He made the poles of acacia wood for carrying the table and overlaid them with gold. The utensils that were upon the table, its bowls, ladles, jugs, and jars with which to offer libations, he made them of pure gold. He made the lampstand of pure gold. He made the lampstand, its base and its shaft of hammered work. Its cups, its calyxes, and petals were of one piece with it. 6 branches issued from its side, 3 branches from one side of the lampstand, and 3 branches from the other lampstand. So again, this is the menorah. This is the 7 candelabra of the temple we talked about before. And originally, again, one in the Mishkan and the tabernacle. So again, this is all Mishkan. There were 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with a calyx and petals on one branch. And there were 3 cups shaped like almond blossom, each with a calyx and petals on the next branch. So for all 6 branches issuing from the lampstand. So again, the menorah, even though it's a menorah, it has a feeling like it's almost like a tree. You notice? It feels like a tree with calyxes and blossoms. It sounds like it's like, and branches, right? Seems like it's a tree. Like a tree of life almost. So there's a feeling like this is a piece of art, but also reflective in some ways of the natural world too. So it must have been pretty amazing. On the lampstand itself were the 4 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with a calyx and petals. A calyx of one piece with it under a pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the second pair of branches, and a calyx of one piece with it under the last pair of branches. So all 6 branches issuing from it. Their calyxes and their stems were of one piece with it. The whole of it a single hammered piece of pure gold. He made its 7 lamps, its tongs, and its fire pans of pure gold. So again, each lamp, each one of those 7 lights, again, everything was of pure gold. He made it all and its furnishings out of a talent of pure gold. So that's like 70 pounds of gold. He made the incense altar of acacia wood, a cubit long and a cubit wide, square, and 2 cubits high. Its horns were of one piece with it. He overlaid it with pure gold. Now, it seems as though some of this stuff was made with pure gold, and some of it was overlaid with pure gold. So there's a difference. Some of the stuff is solid gold, and other pieces, like the incense altar, were overlaid with gold. Probably because if it was pure gold, it would have been when it would heat up, it would collapse on itself, because the heat would have. This is an incense altar. Incense was burned on it, and it would have collapsed on itself. So the altar couldn't be in solid gold.
Did you mention why we're using the acacia?
So
Hardwood.
it's hardwood, but it's also, I mean, I got to tell you, it's the wood that they had around them. Now, it says that they carried stuff with them, and it said that they had acacia wood with them from Egypt, we assume. But if they're cutting down any planks, if they're making any stuff like this, the only wood that they would have had in the wilderness, it's not desert. I want to make clear, it's not the desert, it's wilderness. It would have been acacia wood. It's the only wood they would have had.
Was it also fragrant? Did
Did it have a
keep it
fragrance?
warm? Did it have
I
fragrance?
don't think it's, I don't think it's like, that's not what it's known for, but I think acacia wood can have kind of, I mean, I think it has kind of a smell, but it's not like a strong, it's not like cedar. It's not like one of those woods that has a real pungent or powerful smell, but I think it might have a smell. I think, yeah, I mean, they all do, but some of them are really strong, right? Like balsam wood, or some woods you can smell and right away that what kind of wood it is, right? Especially cedar. But I don't think it's known for its smell. But I do think that it was really a matter of this is what they had. This is what they could work with. So he overlaid it with pure gold. So this is the incense altar. Its side roundabout and its horns, and he made gold molding around it, roundabout. He made 2 gold rings for it under its molding and on its 2 walls on opposite sides as holders for poles. So the incense altar also, like the ark, was carried with poles. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. He prepared the sacred anointing oil and the pure aromatic incense, expertly blended. It's not a whole lot of a description of what the incense was like, as we had before, but it is say that he makes the oils. Now, so that was the incense altar and the oils and the incense. Said both. Before we had a much longer description of it. He had a much longer description of what was in the stuff before. So not everything is in great detail. He made the altar for burnt offering of acacia wood. This is the altar where we saw the big altar for where they put the animals. 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. That's a square. So that's not a rectangle. That's a square. What we found in the ancient world in this area is that every altar that we found has been built like the same way. A square altar with horns on the sides. Every altar we found built the same way with horns on the side. And if you wanted to make an altar no longer usable as an altar, you cut off the altar horns. That was the way that you rendered it. That's the way you vandalized it, by cutting off the horns of the altar.
Or you ended in sacredness.
Yeah, it couldn't be used anymore. You ruined it. So the horns were considered some kind of holiness to it, which also reminds us of the horns that were on Moses.
Yeah.
Are these horns some kinds of like ways of recognizing God, or energy, if you will? Are they a representation of energy coming out, right? The energy coming off of the altar. So this was overlaid with copper, which makes a lot of sense given the fact that this is where animals are being heated up.
Right.
It's not incense, which is hot, but it ain't the heat of animals, the kind of heat that's generated to get those animals burned up. And so that is being covered with
Rabbi, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
He's writing that he's fixing it again.
Does it say?
Can you hear me? Anybody? Okay,
Thanks, Harvey.
got it.
I can hear you.
Unfortunately, I'm not teaching.
Thank you, everybody. Hopefully you can all see everything again. There we go. Sorry. We don't know what's happening, but we're going to fix it. So hopefully you can see everything again. You're back on with us and it will not happen again, I hope. All right. So we were on the laver, which is the washing, the place to wash while they were doing all this stuff. And it's to wash themselves, right? The priests had to wash themselves as they were doing this. So the laver is made out of copper and it's stand of copper. Copper. It's more resilient than gold. It's not as pretty. But look where the copper came from, folks. This is a line that we didn't have before because we didn't know where the copper was going to come from. But here's where it came from. The mirrors of the women who performed tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting. This is one of the more, well, again, what does the note say? We're not really sure what the translation. What does your note say, John? What's your note say?
Mirrors to women. Introduction of this information is obscure, especially the words to perform tasks. Quote, Hebrew does not actually use the term women explicitly. The translation is derived from the feminine forms, and then there's Hebrew, and I can't read it, which some render as women arrayed for a sacred task. In 1 Sam 2:22, it is reported that the priest Eli's son acquired a bad reputation by sleeping with women
Who are working in the
on
temple.
tasks. The task of these women is illuminated by an ancient Near Eastern brick inscription of the Tephar of Susa. It tells of 4 women as guards of the sanctuary whose task also was to pray before a certain statue. Mirrors were probably made of burnished copper and were fairly precious, hence they represented the extra offering. However, I have to say, I was wondering when we were going to come to 24/7 security. Right? You got all this gold, all this stuff, and finally we hear something.
So you said the women were in charge of security?
Well, it tells us the women as guards of the sanctuary. I'm just saying, you know.
Guards.
So it says they perform tasks at the entrance. Now, again, it does not say women. We've understood this to be women. But it doesn't say what they're performing, what tasks they're performing. So it does kind of give us, so the reference that you talked about, that you're referencing, which is from the book of Samuel, talks about Eli's sons, Hophni and Pinchas, who are having relationships with the women that are working in the temple, which was obviously taking advantage of their job as priests. Not a good thing. That is one of the few places that we read about women helping out in the temple. We're in the tabernacle, not the temple, in the tabernacle. We don't know what they did once the temple was built. We don't have any descriptions of women helping out in the temple.
No.
In the tabernacle, yes. Not at the tent of meeting, yes. Not in the temple of Solomon. Again, it could have been an earlier form of what happened when they were in the wilderness and while they were in the land of Israel before they built the temple. Glory, what does your commentary there say?
Much, but it says, mirrored glass was unknown in ancient times, but highly polished bronze gave adequate reflection.
So they're getting into the nitty gritty of what are they even talking about? And that is, people didn't have glass for mirrors. They had glass for some things. They had glass for bottles. It seems like from an early age, or not super early, but early enough people were blowing glass, but they weren't using it for mirrors. They were using polished metal, copper, silver, mainly for mirrors. Let's look at what Rashi has to say about this.
Okay.
Let's take a look at Rashi. For the people who are there with us, you can see us, yes? So here's Rashi. It says in Rashi's commentary, the Israelite women possessed mirrors of copper into which they used to look when they adorned themselves. Even these they did not hesitate to bring as a contribution towards the temple. Now Moses was about to reject them since they were made to pander to their vanity. This is a wonderful commentary. And Rashi, this is from the Talmud, by the way, this Rashi commentary. So he didn't invent this, but this is a midrash, a commentary from the Torah, from the Talmud, which tells us that Moses originally said, don't bring us your mirrors, ladies. That's for your vanity. It's not worthy of coming into the temple. But here's what God said. But the Holy One said, accept them These are dearer to me than all the other contributions, because through them, the women reared those huge hosts in Egypt. For when their husbands were tired through their crushing labor, they used to bring them food and drink and induce them to eat. And then they would take the mirrors and each gazed at herself in the mirror together with the husband, saying to them, see, I am handsomer than you. Thus they awakened their husband's affection and subsequently became the mothers of many children. As it is said, I awakened your love under, and again, this is a line from Song of Songs. This is what it means. And for this reason, the laver was made of them, the mirrors, because it served the purpose of promoting peace between man and wife by giving of its waters to be drunk by a woman whose husband had shown him jealous of her and who nevertheless had associated with another, thus affording her an opportunity to prove her innocence. That's another part. These are all less important than the main part of this midrash, which is the one that we oftentimes focus on, which is that God tells Moses, essentially, I'm going to summarize this point. The mirrors are what helped the women look beautiful for their husbands when they were in Egypt. These same mirrors that they're now having in the wilderness to have melted down into the laver, these same bronze mirrors are what they used to look at when they were in Egypt to make themselves beautiful for their husbands so that they had all those kids in Egypt. If they hadn't had those kids, there would be none of us.
Right.
And so God says to Moses, what are you talking about? These are the best things. The things that the women use to beautify themselves. Don't look at them. Don't look down on them. Don't look at them as their vanity. Look at them for what they really were, which was preserving the Jewish people through marital relations. I don't even know what to tell you, because the impact of that midrash is that God wants husbands and wives to find each other, to find them attractive to each other. That's what the midrash says. At the very basic level, this is saying this is a good thing. Not only is it a good thing, it was so good that God said, this is the most impressive thing for me. All these other jewels, all these other metals, they're not as impressive to me as the mirrors that these women use to beautify themselves. Whoever invented that midrash, whoever came up with that understanding, was making a really important point.
Well, it made a second point too. If they didn't have the copper with the holes in it, they couldn't cook, so the meat would be raw.
Well, they needed it. You're right. They needed it. But do you understand? But what the Torah is telling us, what the Talmud is telling us here, and this is where the Talmud is filled with these wonderful lessons. Pirkei Avot is chock full. I mean, it's all full of these great lessons. But throughout the Talmud, we have these wonderful lessons. And what the lesson here that Judaism says, which is contradictory to other traditions and other religions, is that physical attraction is not a bad thing. On the contrary, it's necessary. This is basically telling us that when we see our spouses, when we see the people we love and are physically attracted to them, there's nothing holier than that. That's what the Midrash just said. God said, this is the most valuable thing that I have. The thing that beautified and made these women attractive to their husbands. Now, you can look at it as a somewhat sexist thing, but it really isn't. Because if anything, then the Midrash would have been set up where Moses didn't say in the first place, I don't think these things are important. And God chastens him and says, you're wrong, Moses. These are the most holy things. And so there's a lesson here, which I think, again, when we talk about it from the aspect of what does Judaism teach us religiously when it comes to attraction, physical attraction, to have sex, it's important. Now, look, the point of this in the Midrash is that that's how they had kids. But you can also say, I'm not saying, you want to take it out of context, but the Midrash is saying that having a wife look attractive to her husband is something important, and vice versa, by the way, which is why, actually, the way that Rashi actually tells the Midrash, the women said to their husbands, I look much better than you, right? Think about it. Would you rather hang out with these guys or with me? Or look at yourself? But forget that for a second. The point is that for the most religious, most observant, Torah observant Jew is never going to say it's not important to have physical relations with your wife. It's not the same in every tradition. There are very religious people of other traditions that'll say, if I'm really holy, if I'm really, really holy, I'm not engaging in sex at all. That's not what God just told Moses.
Right. And the Catholic religion promotes.
I didn't say what religions, Joyce. I didn't pick any religions. You're not incorrect, but I'm also saying, look, it's not, there were religions back then. There were pagan religions where people abstained from sex and did things for whole. Oh yeah, there were, people had lots of different, sex. Oh, there were these rules of chastity were not invented by the Catholic Church. Look, there were Jewish groups that got into that. The Essenes got into a system where they wouldn't have sex. I mean, there were Jews who did it, but it wasn't something that was normal. And it was also, again, when you look at the Midrash, you see this. And when you see, how does an Orthodox guy have 10 kids? It's not because he's not having sex. I mean, I'm just gonna tell you, he's not having less sex.
Oh, but that's different. Modern. The more kids, the more well.
I will tell you that the question of how many kids you're supposed to have, a lot of Orthodox rabbis will tell people in their communities that you're not supposed to have more kids than you can afford to have. Okay, the standard answer is, if you can't afford to have kids, stop having kids. Once you've reached the amount of kids that you should have to have a sustaining family, they would say you don't have to have kids if you can't afford to have kids. But that being said, they're not springing out of nowhere. And again, this is why men and women are encouraged. A religious rabbi, if a woman comes to her rabbi and says, my husband's we're not having sex, they're not going to say, well, that's okay. They'll say, look, are you making yourself attractive to him? I mean, I'm not going to say that it's not like oftentimes put on her, but it's also, I mean, the guy will be counseled by his rabbi too, but they'll say, look, they won't tell them, look, you and I know that when a very religious woman goes out and she's wearing a wig or a head covering, she's not making herself attractive for the most part when she's going out in public. We know that. That's called shomer negia, and it's to stop people from having affairs. I mean, there's a reason for it. That being said, when the couple is in the confines of their own relationship and in their own bedroom, I'm not going to say anything goes, but they're not supposed to not be attracted to each other. They're allowed to have lingerie. They're allowed to have makeup and perfumes and things like that. It's not regarded as being it's not wrong. It's not perverted. It's not looked down on. Because when we have a midrash like that says women's mirrors were used for the holiest thing, and God liked it, that's what the rabbis will say. They have that midrash to turn to and say, that's what the tradition says when it comes to this. So this law is probably one of the more famous, or not law, this teaching is one of the most famous teachings from this Torah portion. The women's mirrors that were used for the laver, the bowl. This is the washing bowl. Okay. So this is a line that was why we talked about it. All right. He made the enclosure on the south side, 100 cubits of hangings. And this is the enclosure. This is the outer wall, the outer fabric walls of twisted linen for the enclosure, with the 20 posts and their 20 sockets of copper, the hooks and bands of the posts being silver. On the north side, again, 100 cubits. So the long sides, north and south sides, 100 cubits with their 20 posts and their 20 sockets of copper and hooks, the hooks and bands of posts being silver. And on the west side, 50 cubits. So that's the back side, 50 cubits of hangings with their 10 posts, and their 10 sockets, the hooks and the bands of the post being silver. And on the front side to the east, 50 cubits. But 15 cubits of hanging on the one flank with their 3 posts and their 3 sockets, and 15 cubits on the other flank on each side of the gates of the enclosure with 3 posts and their 3 sockets. Why? Because there was an opening on the east side for the people to walk through. So it was 50 cubits, about 70 feet, 65, 70 feet. But in the middle, there's an opening, and on the either side, there's 15 cubits of hangings. All the hangings around the enclosure were fine twisted linen, but that's why you don't see it of color. The sockets for the posts were of copper, and the hooks and the bands of the posts were of silver. The overlay of the tops was of silver. All the posts of the enclosure were banded with silver. The screen of the gate of the enclosure, done embroidery, was of blue, purple, and crimson yard and fine twisted linen. It was 20 cubits long. Its height or width was 5 cubits, like that of the hangings of the enclosure. And what is that? That is the opening. That's the 20 cubits. That is the opening for the place. Between the linen was an opening that was like this. This was colorful. The posts were 4. Their 4 sockets were of copper, their hooks of silver, and the overlay of their tops was of silver, as were their bands. All the pegs of the tabernacle and of the enclosure round about were of copper. So that is the end of Vayakel when it's read by itself. And then what we're going to finish with right now, Pekudei, is the last chapter and a half or so of the Torah, or of the book of Exodus. And this begins with the words Ele Pekudei. And so when this is important because the words Pekudei, the second word, means these are the records, or Glory, what does your word say? These are the accountings, the accounting. Does it say
The amounts.
amounts?
of the material.
Yep. So Pekudei, what does King James say, Mary?
Some.
Sums. All better translate. Well, I don't say better, but they're all a little bit more descriptive than records. Record seems to indicate like any kind of information. The Pekudei here is an accounting, a ledger, financials. Where are the financials? Where's the spreadsheet? That's what this is. This is the spreadsheet. This is the spreadsheet of the tabernacle. They never would have used that word up until about 20 years ago, right? But that's what it is. It's an accounting. The tabernacle of the pact, which were drawn up at Moses' bidding, the work of the Levites under the direction of Itamar, son of Aaron the priest. So this is the record. And again, why does Moses do this? So that nobody says, Moses, where's all the money? Moses does the accounting so that everybody knows that Moses didn't keep the money. And so this is all done by the priests under Moses' accounting. Moses doesn't do the accounting. You can't have him do the accounting himself. You can't have the person who spent the money do the accounting. You have to have an audit. The audit's being done by other Levites, other people in the family, but these are people who are going to check the amounts. And here's what it says. Most importantly, Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, made all that Adonai had commanded of Moses. He did what he was supposed to do. Check that off. The contractor did his job. Doesn't always happen. The contractor and his main subcontractor, Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, carver and designer and embroiderer in blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine linen. He did his job. All the gold that was used for the work and all the work of the sanctuary, the elevation, offering of gold, came to 29 talents, 730 shekels by the sanctuary weight. Let's see what the note here says. A talent here equals 3,000 shekels. 730 shekels left on top of that. So 29 times 3,000 shekels comes out to how much, Glory? How much is that? What does the commentary there say? This is gold.
1,775 shekels.
No, it's 29. A talent here says 3,000 shekels. So it's roughly, figure it's about, well, it's about 900,000 shekels. It's a lot. A lot of gold. It's pounds and
300,000 shekels.
yeah, it could be, but it could be a different commentary. I mean, it could be a different calculation.
There are 2,000 shekels in talent.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
1,000 shekels, which when added to the 1,775 shekels gives a grand total of 301,775. Half a shekel for each of the 603. 5 minus 550 men of military age.
Oh, well, no, it's okay. We haven't gotten to that part yet.
Oh,
The silver of those who in the community who were recorded came to 100 talents. So 29 talents of gold, 100 talents of silver, plus 1,700. It's almost like 100.5 talents, and 1,775 shekels by the sanctuary weight. A half shekel a head, a half shekel by the sanctuary weight for each one of those who were entered in the records from the ages of 20 and up, 603,550 men.
Wow.
So that's a half a shekel per person, which would have been, that's how we get to the 300 shekels. If it's a half a shekel for those 600,000 people, it would be 300,000 shekels. So the question is, does the 100 talents times 3,000 would be 300,000. So that's the silver. So with the amount that your commentary was talking about was how do they come up with 100 shekels? It's but that's the silver. The 100 talents of silver were for casting the sockets of the sanctuary and the sockets of the curtain, 100 sockets to the 100 talents, a talent a socket. And of the 1,775 shekels, he made the hooks of the posts, overlay for the tops and the bands around them. So that's the silver. That's an accounting of the silver. The gold, again, we don't really have a breakdown as much as we do with this stuff, which again, I guess you could make the argument that the silver is spread out over a much bigger amount of stuff because it's on all the hooks. It's on all the sockets. It's all throughout the building. So where's the silver? There's the silver. And then you have the accounting of it. The gold is primarily on the menorah. It's on the ark, obviously. But it's not spread out around all the cloth is being held up by silver. Next, the copper. So we have gold, most expensive, silver, and then we get to copper. The copper from the elevation offering came to 70 talents and 2,400 shekels. Of it, he made the socket. So again, 3,000 shekels to a talent means there was almost 71 talents of copper. Of it, he made the sockets for the entrance of the tent of meeting, the copper altar, and its copper grating and all the utensils of the altar. So there's actually less copper, as you can see, than silver. Silver's more expensive, but there was more silver than copper. Of it, he made the sockets, it says, the sockets of the enclosure roundabout, the sockets of the gate of the enclosure, and all the pegs of the tabernacle, and all the pegs of the enclosure roundabout. But again, a lot of the copper went on the altar and on the grating, and on all the hooks and all the meat hooks and all the stuff that they were using for the cooking, for the boiling. Got it?
Yeah.
Now, let's get to the accounting of the cloth and of the jewels. Of the blue, purple, and crimson yarns, they also made the service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary. They made Aaron's sacral vestments as Adonai had commanded Moses. The ephod was made of gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen. They hammered out sheets of gold and cut threads to be worked on into designs, among them the blue, the purple, and the crimson yarns and the fine linen. They made for attaching shoulder pieces. They were attached at the two ends. That's for the ephod that went over the priest. The decorated band that was upon it was made like it, of one piece with it, of gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen as Adonai had commanded Moses. They bordered the lazuli stones with frames of gold engraved with seal engravings of the names of the sons of Israel. We talked about that, the tribes. They were set on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones for the remembrance of the Israelites, as Adonai had commanded Moses. The breastpiece was made into the style of the ephod of gold, blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen. And this is the breastplate, which also had the priests they had the names of the tribes. It was square. They made the breastpiece doubled, a span in length and a span in width doubled. They set on it 4 rows of stones. The first row was of carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald. The second row, a turquoise, a sapphire, and amethyst. And on the third row, a jacinth, an agate, and a crystal. And on the fourth row, a beryl, a lapis lazuli, and a jasper. And they were encircled in their mountings with frames of gold. The stones corresponded in numbers to the names of the sons of Israel, 12 corresponding to their names, engraved like seals, with each of the names of the 12 tribes. On the breastplate, the breastpiece, they made braided chains of corded work in pure gold. They made 2 frames of gold and 2 rings of gold, and fastened the 2 rings at the ends of the breastpiece, attaching the 2 golden cords to the 2 rings at the ends of the breastpiece. They then fastened the 2 ends on the cords of the 2 frames, attaching them to the shoulder pieces of the ephod at the front. They made 2 rings of gold and attached them to the 2 ends of the breastpiece at its inner edge, which faced the ephod. They made 2 rings of gold and fastened them on the front of the ephod, low on the shoulder pieces, close to the seam above the decorated band. The breastpiece was held in place by a cord of blue from its rings to the rings of the ephod, so the breastpiece rested on the decorated band. It did not come loose from the ephod, as Adonai had commanded Moses. And again, just to show you real quick, the breastpiece and the ephod, so you can see it up close again. This is a good picture of it.
Must have been heavy, too.
Oh, probably. But why was this thing so beautiful? Well, to some extent, it had responsibility of reminding the people
Wow.
that they were all included in the priest's work. There's the ephod. These are the stones that attached to, the ones that also had the names of the tribes. So there's 6 tribes on each one of these. And then there was the 12 tribes, the tribe stones here. And you can see that the crimson, blue, and purple thread. So you can see how colorful and how beautiful it was. So the opening of the robe in the middle of it was like the opening of a coat of mail, with a binding around the opening so it would not tear. On the hem of the robe, they made pomegranates of blue, purple, and crimson yarns twisted. They also made bells of pure gold and attached the bells between the pomegranates, all around the hem of the robe between the pomegranates. A bell and a pomegranate, all around the hem of the robe for officiating in as Adonai commanded Moses. They made the tunics of fine linen. And again, this is all the vestments of woven work for Aaron and his sons. And the headdress of fine linen, and the decorated turbans of fine linen, and the linen breeches of fine twisted linen, and sashes of fine linen, twisted linen, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, done in embroidery as Adonai had commanded Moses. They made for the frontlet of the holy crown the diadem of pure gold, and incised upon its seal, holy to Adonai, kadosh l'Adonai. They attached to it a cord of blue to fix it upon the headdress above, as Adonai had commanded Moses. Thus was completed all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. The Israelites did so, just as Adonai had commanded Moses, so they did. So again, let's just look real quick. Just so you know, speaking of our good friend Steven Spielberg, there's Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there's the archaeologist, the French archaeologist Belloc, the bad guy, making up his priestly vestments. He's got the ephod on. There's the ephod. There's the breastplate. There's the male-like robe underneath it. That was like male, it said. There's the crown that went over the turban. Crown that says Kadosh Ladonai right there. There's, of course, the bad Nazi guy that gets burned. And they both get burned at the end. That's it. It's the wrong. Yeah, that's the wrong guy. That was the guy from Raiders of the Lost Ark 2. But there's Balak before. That was when he was in the car, the Jeep. But yeah, this is what the thing looked like. So here he is with the ark right before he gets burned up. So now you know. There's the Kruvim on top of the ark. So yeah, they reconstructed it. They reconstructed it for them for his vision, for his movie. Now we have a greater understanding of why he was so taken with that stuff. You know? So they brought the tabernacle to Moses with all the tent and its furnishings, its clasps, its planks, its bars, its posts, and its sockets, the covering of tan ram skins, the covering of dolphin skins, and the curtain for the screen, the ark of the pact and its poles and its covers, and all the table and its utensils and the bread of display, the pure lampstand, right? The menorah, its lamps in due order, and all its fittings, and the oil for lighting. The altar of gold, the oil for anointing, the aromatic incense, and the screen for the entrance of the tent, the copper altar with its copper grating, its poles and all its utensils, and the laver and its stand, the hangings of the enclosure, its posts, its sockets, the screen for the gate of the enclosure, its cords, its pegs, all the furnishings for the service of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, the service vestments for officiating in the sanctuary, the sacral vestments for Aaron the priest, and the vestments for the priestly service. Now they bring this all to Moses, and it seems as though it has not been assembled yet. Is that they show it all to him before they put it together. So he gets to look at everything before it's all put together. And here's the important fact right here. Just as Adonai had commanded, so the Israelites had done all the work. And when Moses saw that they performed all the tasks as Adonai had commanded, as they had done, Moses blessed them. So they did everything that God had commanded. They don't always do that. They don't always follow directions, right?
Right.
They are sometimes very, very bad at following directions. In this case, they did good. And what does Moses do? He pats them on the back with a blessing. And we're going to finish up right now because this is not a hugely long chapter. It's only, it's not short, but we're going to finish up with chapter 40 right now. Because what happens, it's all been assembled, or it's all been brought in front of them. And here's what Moses says. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the 10th month, on the first day of the first month, you shall set up the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. So the first day of the first month. So that is at this time before Passover, just before Passover, 2 weeks before. Place there the ark of the pact and screen off the ark with the curtain. Bring in the table and lay on its due setting. Bring in the lampstand and its lamp. So look what he says. Look what God says the first to do. Set up the tabernacle and the tent of meeting. Well, set up the building, set up the tents, right? Set it up, and then bring in the ark. Put up the screen, right? And then bring in the table, lay it out, bring out the lampstand and light its lamps, and then place the gold altar of incense before the ark of the pact. So it's almost like working out. You put out the ark, you start moving outwards, put up the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. You shall place the altar of burnt offering before the entrance of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. Place the laver between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Don't bring it filled with water. Put it up first and then put the water in it. Set up the enclosure round about and put in place the screen for the gate of the enclosure. And you shall take the anointing oil and anoint the tabernacle, all that is in it, and consecrate all its furnishings so that it will be holy. So you take some of the shemen, you take some of the oil, and you anoint the tabernacle. You sprinkle it on there. Anoint the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils to consecrate the altar so that it may be most holy. Okay? Anoint the laver, and it stands to consecrate it. And you shall bring in Aaron. And by the way, notice what they're not sprinkling it on. They don't sprinkle on the ark. Anoint the burnt offering and all its utensils to consecrate the altar, so that the altar shall be most holy. Okay, here it goes. And you shall bring Aaron and his sons forward to the entrance of the tent of meeting and wash them with water. Put the sacred vestments on Aaron and anoint him and consecrate him, that he may serve me as priest. Then bring his sons forward, put the tunics on them, and anoint them as you have anointed their father, that they may serve me as priests. Thus their anointing shall serve them for everlasting priesthood throughout the ages. So it says, first do Aaron, consecrate him as priest, and then bring his sons. So they don't say bring the sons first and get the junior guys there, and then do the head guy afterwards. Do the head guy first, then do his sons, then do the next and most important people. And Moses did just as Adonai had commanded him, so he did. Which means that Moses's job is to consecrate the priests in the first place. So the priests don't consecrate themselves. Moses consecrates them on behalf of God. And then it says in the first month of the second year, on the first of the month, the tabernacle was set up. What that means is that a year after they came out of Egypt, they made the tabernacle their religious home. A year after they came out of Egypt. So it wasn't there for 40 years, it was there for 39 years, but it was there for the vast majority of their time in the desert. It took about a year at Mount Sinai for them, not quite a year, it took them a few weeks to get to Mount Sinai, but from the time they're at Mount Sinai to hear the 10 Commandments and building all this stuff.
So for 39 years, they had.
Tabernacle and the ark.
Wow.
And what they also had was a year or so at Mount Sinai.
They weren't really wandering in the
No,
What is that?
it comes from what you think wandering in the desert means. They don't wander in the desert. It's such a weird thing because we're told that that's what happens.
Right.
They don't wander in the desert. They know exactly where they are the entire time. There's no getting lost. I don't know how this started, this idea that they
Right.
wandered in the desert. They go wherever God tells them to go. God just doesn't tell.
Then like a cloud.
Correct, but exactly. So they're never wandering, but they're never allowed to enter into the land
Ah,
for a reason, which we'll get to in Numbers, right?
where are they following him all over? Just around?
No,
the
they're
ground?
following him towards the promised land, but they
But it
literally,
shouldn't take that long.
it didn't take that long. They spent most of those 40 years waiting outside the land.
Really?
The idea of them wandering for 40 years is just not what the Bible says. And there's a reason for it. They're not lost. They're not wandering. The punishment is that they know exactly where they're supposed to go and they don't get to go.
Oh,
The punishment isn't wandering. The punishment is looking 2 miles away and knowing that you were so close. That's the punishment.
why don't we know that?
Because people, well, here's the problem. People don't tell it that way. Because I think what people do is they want you to,
And who is the they that want us to do?
I think people who want to make it seem as though if you don't achieve what you're supposed to achieve, then you're lost.
Oh, okay.
It's easier to say that, isn't it? It's easier to say, I didn't really know what to do. The hard thing is to admit that you knew what to do and you didn't do it. And you had to deal with the consequences of it. It's much easier to say, I got lost.
I wonder.
I just didn't know. No, you knew. But that's very hard to confront that. People don't want to confront that because that's the hardest thing in life is to know that you knew exactly what to do and you didn't do it. People would much rather say, I didn't know. It's not the case. That's the hard truth. And that's why people, I think, have always deferred to this wandering idea, or this idea that they're punished by being lost. No, it's much harder than that. The truth is they knew exactly what they were supposed to do, and they are confronted with that on a daily basis for 38 years. 38 years, they're confronted with the consequences.
The manna came down, they ate it.
Yeah, but they also knew that they could have been at home. They could have been in Israel. It's not that they're lost. It's not they can't find the way in. All right, let's finish this up. Moses set up the tabernacle, placing its sockets, setting up its planks, inserting its bars, and erecting its post. What? Moses did it? Moses did it. He spread the tent of over the tabernacle, placing the covering of the tent on top of it, just as Adonai had commanded Moses. That's what it says. God gave him the strength to do it. He's 80 years old too. 81, 82. God told him to do it, and he said, I'm going to do it myself. I've done that before. I've done stuff that I could have delegated to other people. Feels good to do it. Maybe it felt good for Moses to do it. Yeah, that's my name, Moses. No, this is why you feel a sense of accomplishment when you do it yourself. Yep. He took the pact and placed it in the ark. He fixed the poles to the ark and placed the cover on top of the ark. And he brought the ark inside the tabernacle. Then he put the curtain for screen and screened off the ark of the pact, just as Adonai had commanded Moses. He placed the table and the tent of meeting outside the curtain on the north side of the tabernacle. Upon it, he laid the setting of the bread before Adonai, as Adonai had commanded Moses. He placed the lampstand and the tent of meeting opposite the table on the south side of the tabernacle. And he lit the lamps before Adonai, as Adonai had commanded Moses. He placed the altar of gold in the tent of meeting before the curtain. On it, he burned aromatic incense, as Adonai had commanded Moses. And then he put up the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. He's the first to get to do it. Nobody can ever do it.
And the translation, do they keep calling it pact? If you put the pact,
What does your translation say?
they.
Ark of the
call it
Covenant?
pact.
What does it say? The Ark of the Covenant? In 20.
They brought the ark into the tabernacle.
No, it's in verse 21.
Yes.
What does it say? Ark of the Pact? Ark
They
of
put
Ark of the
curtain
Pact?
and
Ark of
screen.
the tabernacle.
The Ark of the Tabernacle?
I'm sorry, then he brought the ark into the tabernacle and hung the shielding curtain and shielded the ark of the testament.
Okay, so that's the word, Testament. They translate it,
He
he took the pact,
So the fact is,
is the Ten Commandments, yeah.
that makes sense. We have a pact together.
So it's like.
What does your translation say, Mary? Testimony, testament, it's the Adut. It doesn't say the Ten Commandments, but it doesn't say the Ten Commandments. It says the Ark of, it says the pact.
Okay,
It says the pact, which means it may not have been in the person who wrote that's mind that it's 10 commandments. It's all the pact. It's all the rules, not the 10, just the 10 commandments.
Go to Washington DC.
the whole agreement.
What the what?
If you go to Washington DC, go find it
In that warehouse. That's right. Yep. And it says he placed the lampstand. Okay, he put the bread down. He placed the lampstand in the tent of meeting opposite the temple on the south side of the tabernacle, and he lit the lamps before Adonai, as Adonai had commanded Moses. He placed the altar of gold in the tent of meeting before the curtain, and on it he burned aromatic incense, as Adonai had commanded Moses. And then he put up the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. And at the entrance of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, he placed the altar of burnt offering, and on it he offered up the burnt offering and the meal offering, as Adonai had commanded Moses.
So he did the very
First offering. He placed the laver between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it for Washington. a washing. From it, Moses and Aaron and his sons would wash their hands and feet. They washed when they entered the tent of meeting and when they approached the altar, as Adonai had commanded Moses. And he set up the enclosure around the tabernacle and the altar and put up a screen for the gate of the enclosure. And when Moses had finished the work, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the presence of Adonai filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of Adonai filled the tabernacle. When the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on their various journeys. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out at such a time as it did lift. For over the tabernacle, a cloud of Adonai rested by day, and fire would appear by night, in the view of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys.
Wow.
The journey begins. The journey begins, and we will say it right now. Hazak, hazak, v'nit hazek, which is be strong, let all of us be strengthened. And that is the words that we traditionally say when we finish up the Torah portion, when it's the end of a book. And this is the end of the book of Exodus, which will start officially on the Jewish calendar in a couple of weeks. What's the last word? Bechol masehem, which really is important. What does your last word say, Glory? On their journeys?
Let's see. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel during all their travels.
All the travels.
I like journeys better than travels, but that's okay. What does yours say, Mary? Yeah, I think travels is sounds more like, yeah. And they're guided the whole time by God's presence. They know where they're going. God is literally with them. But travels almost sounds like they're, on a trip, they're on they went on vacation. Yeah, they went on vacation. This is a journey. And it's real important, though, that the last word of the portion actually is the journey, because that's the way Exodus. So the Exodus, the book begins when we're in Egypt, and it ends with this understanding that the journey is laying in front of them now. That now that they have what they need to gather at and worship at,
Then they begin.
then the journey begins. And so they have a place that they can come together to worship, to know that they're in the presence of God.
But they made all the poles to
Yep.
carry it, the tabernacle with
Yeah.
them on every journey.
Yep. But Exodus means exiting. But the last word of the book isn't that they got to where they were supposed to get to, but that the journey actually begins at the end of the book. So the exiting is only the first step. The rest of the journey is what we get for the next 38 years, which is the rest of the book of
Wow,
Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
wow.
So the next three books of the Bible take place over 38 years. 38 years for three books.
Yeah,
So thousands of years have started from the beginning of humanity to the moment we're at right now.
yes.
And it's hit this moment where, as we said, there's a parallel between the creation. We've come to a point, folks. We started with the creation of the universe at the beginning of Genesis.
Yeah.
And at the end of Exodus, we have the creation of the Mishkan, which to some extent is heaven on earth. It's the place where heaven and earth meet. And so Genesis to Exodus ends in a unit right here, which is the creation of, that's why I said there's only one chapter about the creation of the universe, but there's 10 chapters about the creation of the tabernacle. But what's really important is not the universe to some extent, the Bible's telling us, but it's where we meet God, right? Because in the scheme of the universe is immense, it's huge. But what really matters is the place where we meet God. For our ancestors, it was the tabernacle. It was this place. For us, it's, we believe wherever we let God in is the place that we're meeting God. But what does it mean about, where's the universe? It's right where we are. It doesn't really matter unless we're recognize where we are at this point. I don't know. To me, it's a pretty heavy thing.
Yeah.
Because Genesis it got us to this point. But this is really the point. This is where we really take off. This is where the journey begins. So, we said Exodus begins with the slavery. Then it moves into the laws, to us getting the laws. And then the last third of it is creation of a sacred community and creation of the sacred space. So it's the Exodus, it's freedom, it's law, and then it's the last third of it is understanding, our place
So
in the world.
Andrews must have really thought that was very, very, very important.
Yeah. We said it maybe is the key to the understanding the whole Bible.
Probably. Think about it. Think about how many.
For the priests, this is it. Look, that's not my message. That's not my takeaway. My takeaway is that that's what they understood. And I don't think that they're wrong. It's just for them, that's what they understood. But for me, I take away from it, oh yeah, it was really important for them to find a nexus point, a place where we can come in contact with God. For them, this was what it was. For us, it's a little bit harder, it's a little bit easier. Yeah.
That Moses actually put the ark in the Holy of Holies. That's the only time he ever went into it.
Assumedly, after that, nobody goes in except for the priest,
Right.
when the priest does
Only
it.
time he ever went.
Yeah, but Moses gets to do it. And to some extent, what are you saying? Like who could have done it before him? Nobody else can do it. He's the only one who could take he's the only one who was commanded directly by God to do it. Aaron didn't hear it, Moses did.
What's also confusing is that not only did he build the tabernacle, but it said he built the whole enclosure around it.
He assembled it.
Yeah.
So what was important about this is that's what the Torah said. Now you can say, well, did an 80-year-old guy really do it? It doesn't matter. The point is that it says that they brought it to him. He didn't walk out and find the whole thing built. They brought him the stuff, they laid it out in front of him, and then he went to work.
Or he was the foreman.
Whatever, but the point is that
They always.
he does it though. The fact is that it says that he did it.
Did it.
It doesn't say he had help. Maybe he did. Maybe, but he did it. Nobody else did it but him. Now you can make the argument, who else can do it? Who else can do it? Because if anyone does it in the first place, they didn't necessarily hear it right from God. He heard it from God. But in a sense, he's not a priest, but the priest, he has to kick it into gear.
Ordain them and
He
anoint
did.
them.
As God's messenger and leader on earth, he had to do it. He had to kick it in. Otherwise, nobody else could. And nobody could have done it. No, who else can do it? No other human being can do it. So he's the one who kicks it all into gear. Now, folks, we're moving into Leviticus, Vayikra, into Leviticus, the third book of the Bible. Now, here's the challenge, folks. I'm out of town next week, but I very much want to do the class virtually. But I will not do the class virtually if people do not want to do the class virtually. Now, for those who are there virtually,
There'll be a class.
there'll be a class. Well, they have no issue. But the issue is everybody okay with being here virtually? I don't want people to not be here.
Oh,
I know, but as long as you're going to be here online, we'll do it virtually next week.
I will.
I will be out of town. I'll be out of the country. Yeah, I'll be in Mexico. What? Why are you shaking your head?
Last time I went-
I'm going to a different part of Mexico. I'm not even going to the water this time. No, we're going to Cabo, but you can't go in the water. Can't go in the ocean. It's because you're not allowed. The beaches are closed. You can't, none of the hotels you can go in the ocean. Not in any hotel I've ever been in Cabo.
Been in the ocean.
In Cabo?
Yeah.
Terrible.
When did you go into the ocean?
We went jet ski.
When? Wait. You went jet skiing, but did you go from a port, from a dock, or did you go off a beach?
I went to the beach at the very tip.
No.
It wasn't Cabo. It was the
Bye, everybody. Stay safe wherever you are. We'll see you online next week, though. We'll be online.
Bye, Rabbi. Thanks.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.